How many of you out there struggle with getting the club to go too far to the inside during the takeaway? Most golfers do this. In fact, I even have a tendency to do it every now and then. And when I do, I go back to one simple drill and one simple feeling that keeps the club from ever going too far inside during the takeaway. And it all has to do with your left wrist. When most golfers take the club inside, the club looks like this. So ideally, the club in a perfect takeaway would be right over the edge of my toes, straight down the target line, parallel to the ground, with the club face toed up or slightly toed in. Generally, this is a bad spot to be in. So we use that as a general guide. Now, most golfers end up in here like this. Now, what movements could I do with my body that could allow this to happen? Well, there's a lot of things. I could overturn my hips, overturn my shoulders, but what's most common is they let their left wrist flatten out because they take the right wrist and hinge it back, and that flattens the left wrist out, and that's what allows the club face to go back inside. The simple trick to resolving this is take your thumb, put it in the crease of your left wrist joint, and hold it there during the takeaway. So what you'll see is that my left wrist still has the same cuppings, or close to it, that it had at address. When I hold this joint in, it allows me to easily keep that wrist in that same cupped position. Now as I do my takeaway, watch what happens. So now I've got my thumb there. Look where the club is. It's outside my hands, never ever inside. My wrist has to deviate and go back this way and flatten out in order for the club to go inside. But if I take that thumb, hold it there, all of a sudden I've got a perfect takeaway. If I want to screw the takeaway up, hinge that right wrist back, flatten the left wrist out, club's buried inside, I'm in trouble. With rotary swing, that's how we fix problems. We fix the muscles and the joints that are moving the golf club instead of trying to tell you, oh, well, just feel like the club goes more outside. That's such an abstract concept that everybody's going to interpret differently. I hate that kind of stuff. I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it right, how to build a perfect takeaway by telling you exactly which muscles to use in your body. If that resonates with you, take a look at this bonus clip on how I'm going to show you how to use your body in just a simple 2-inch shoulder blade movement to make a perfect takeaway every single time. If you recall in the very first video of this series, I talked about the concept, the physics concept of pushing versus pulling, and how all movement is a push or a pull. When it comes to the golf swing, as we've gone through this video series, it's a critical concept that you understand pushing versus pulling, and that applies right for the first foot that you move the club off the ball, and we're going to talk about the takeaway with that. So I have my assistant here, Chris, and I'm going to have him hold this club against his shoulders, and I'm going to have him just stand there without doing anything, and I'm going to move him around. I'm going to be his force of movement, as we talked about in the first video. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push him from either side. So as I push him, oh, don't fall too far off. I'm going to push him off here, and then I'm going to push him from this side, and you're going to notice that his head is going to tend to want to move around. Now watch what happens when I pull from the other side. Now when I pull, notice how his head stays really centered, and he's not moving around much at all. This concept is critical because as I pull, I'm beginning to move towards center, toward a fixed point. Now when you push something, where does it move? A push can move in any direction away from center. It's always moving away from the force of movement, and a pulling motion is moving toward the force of movement. So if you remember my little toy truck I had at the very beginning of the first video, that concept is applicable here in the takeaway. If I get Chris to pull his right shoulder back and in towards his spine, it's going to get the club to move out away in the right direction, in the right spot every single time. So Chris, go ahead and get in a setup position here. And all I want you to do is focus on taking that right shoulder back and pulling it back as you take the club back. So notice as he does that, the club goes right into the right spot. Now let's turn down the line and let's do the same thing. And again, I don't want you to do anything but just focus on pulling your right shoulder back as you take the club back. And as he does that, and let's just keep doing this back and forth, just focus on pulling the right shoulder back, not moving his arms or club or hands or anything at all. He's just moving his right shoulder. The club goes into the exact same spot, thank you, every single time. This is a critical concept if you want to stay centered in your takeaway and get the club to go in the same spot every time. All you really need to understand is, again, this concept of pushing versus pulling.